Okay guys, we're back at the desk, and this time I wanted to go ahead and talk about light and shadow. As of right now, I have two sources of light. So I have a light behind me which creates a shadow on the table right here. As you can see, it's a cast shadow. When you have two light sources, you end up with two separate shadows. As you can see here, there's these little sort of echo shadows on the desk. Now, I'm going to go ahead and use this egg as a great example of light. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the main light from behind my desk so that we can go ahead and discuss how light affects objects. So this egg, as you can see here, go ahead and dissipate this just a little bit. So this egg right here is going to be our example. If you pull this into, now that I have this into focus, I'm going to go ahead and show you different aspects of the shadows. So we have this space. So I'm going to put this on the side. We have this space right here, the brightest section, which is called the highlight. This section that is called the midtone. If you notice this line right here, this line right here is called the terminator. As you can see, that terminator line shifts around the objects, following the texture as well as the shape. Eggs are great examples of light and shadow. These are great ways to see what it is. So you see this little circle right here. This is the highlight. Because I'm using a white surface underneath, we also have this section of reflected light right here. You see this bright white section between the terminator line and the cast shadow on the table. This slightly brighter section right here is called the reflected light. You also see it from the reflection of the pencil as well as I'm touching the egg. Now, if I move the light off to the side, you'll see the curve that the terminator makes goes around the outside and comes back to the beginning in a crescent moon shape. It is following the shape of the egg. Now, this is a great example for textures, and specifically with light itself. So one of the textures that we discussed, one of the techniques that we discussed was stippling. As you can see, as I move the light around the egg, it has all these little dots that appear. That is the texture of the egg itself. As I move the light, the dots are amplified, especially around the terminator line right here, as well as this highlight right here. You will have 2 to 3 sections. Now, if this was a cartoon, you could just leave this white, color this gray, color this black, and color this gray again. And that will give you the shape you desire. Now, the closer I bring the light in, the more shadow you have. The further out, the less shadow, the less defined that terminator light can be. But the cast shadow on the ground is very important. This is what we're going to talk about next. So if I have the cast shadow directly above the egg, let's focus down there for a second. The cast shadow, if the light is directly above the egg, notice it has a shadow right here along the center. You have the reflected light from the surface, and then you have the cast shadow, which is just a perfect little circle underneath. Now, as I move the light off to the side, you end up with a more oval-shaped shadow. The closer it is to the surface, the longer that shadow becomes. The further up I become, the shorter it becomes. Each side that the shadow is on is determined by where you put the light. The shadow will always remain on the opposite side of the light. So this is what you're going to be practicing for today. You are going to be practicing creating the shadow and light. Remember, when you start to draw, you want to start with the terminator line. So I'm going to go ahead and start drawing this for you, and we will go ahead and explain how this works.